Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of the 1871 podcast. And our special guest tonight is the former Crewe player and manager David Artell. And before we start, I would just like to mention my dad, Brian Roach. Today is the first anniversary of my dad passing away. And as some of you might know, he was a former Reading director and he helped to block the proposed merger with Oxford United in 1983. So just wanted to mention my dad again today. I'm sure a few of you will remember back to that time in the mid-80s. And then my dad went on to become a director back in the Elm Park days. And that was back in the days when I was the PA announcer for one season at Reading as well, at Elm Park. I don't know if you ever heard me announcing the half-time scores, Johnny, but anyway, let's move on from that. Let's bring it right up to date. Reading won on Saturday.
Yes.
And actually, I was having a conversation with David talking about tonight, and David confidently predicted a Reading win. We were obviously very hopeful. 2 goals from Tom Ince, an Andy Carroll penalty, and Johnny, a decent performance from Reading as well.
Yeah, it really was. We spoke before on the podcast about it was a kind of Ulster Cup final game. They really need to win that, and they after the Cardiff performance, they really stepped up. And when you're 1-0 up, you're thinking get that second. Didn't happen in the first half, but then you got the second, and that was it. But even as a Reading fan, you're still thinking, even though it's 3-0 with 2 minutes to go and they got a goal back, and I'm like, oh no, I was kind of confident, but you never know with this. But that's you would hope that's the springboard now to staying up. 13-point gap, I think it is. You really, with the fixtures we've got, you should be able to get looking at 2 wins, maybe a draw.
And on that note, I mean, Reading are on 44 points now, which is already 3 more than we finished on last season. So in theory, we could already be safe, but it's looking pretty good now. I mean, we're sort of looking fairly comfortable in mid-table, aren't we? So I think we could be quite confident that Reading are staying up now, can't we?
As Reading fans can ever be confident.
And I just want to ask you, how important of a player do you think Tom Ince has become for Reading? Because he was out of the side and we were struggling. He's come back in, got 2 goals, got a win. Okay, it was against Blackpool, who are down near the bottom, but he got a couple of goals on Saturday, and he's probably in contention for player of the season this year, isn't he?
I would say probably a clear winner of it already, to be honest. I think without him, he's the engine of the team, and I think that game when he was rested, you notice the difference. He gives that energy. I know his dad says that he's a moaner, probably like his dad, but you need that in a team. You need people that get people going. But he backs up his words with actions. Every game, how many times he's there in the 93rd minute chasing, putting the tackles in. And we've missed that as a club for years. And, hopefully it's done his career good, where he was kind of drifting around for a few years, not really going anywhere. Now he's maybe found home, and obviously his dad's there, but he seems to love playing here. And I think I saw a stat the other day. I think it's his highest amount of goals in the Championship for a fair few years, which, and it's not just the goals, it's the ones he creates as well, and the energy he brings.
And this is, I think I'm right in saying this is Paul Ince's longest time as a manager, isn't it? Already,
I think.
Is that right? Have I got that right?
Yeah, just over a year. It's crazy.
Yeah. So look, let's. Dylan's not with us because he's been out in Algeria at the weekend with his side, Marumo Gallants. Unfortunately, they lost 2-0 in Algeria last night in the CAF Confederation Cup after winning their first 2 games. So disappointing result for Dylan, but they're still in a good position to qualify from the group stage. So we'll be talking about him, about Marumo Gallants and what he's doing out in South Africa next time we speak to him, I'm sure. But I want to introduce David Artell now. So quick introduction to David. David, correct me if I've got any of this wrong, because you did play for a few clubs. So you were a centre-back with Rotherham, Shrewsbury, or Shrewsbury as some people pronounce it, Mansfield, which is how I know you. When I was a reporter at the Nottingham Evening Post, covered Mansfield games. So that's how I know David. And then you went on to Chester, Morecambe, Crewe, Port Vale, Northampton, Wrexham, Barlowtown, and a few other clubs besides. And you also played for Gibraltar, and you played at least at one of your, a couple of your clubs, I think, under former Reading player Keith Curle, didn't you?
I did, Keith. I had Keith at Mansfield, where I know you from, and then he signed me for Chester when he left Mansfield. He took me with him to Chester.
And what was, I mean, I remember him as a player, like fantastic player. He's one of the fastest defenders that I've ever seen. I mean, you know, Michael Gilks was sort of playing as a wing back on a few occasions, but in terms of an actual defender, I'm not sure I've seen too many quicker players than Keith Curle. But what was he like as a manager, David?
He was first of all, he wanted us to play football, and it sounds crazy, but as the years have gone past, I think he's gone more and more away from that. But when he first, you know, Mansfield was, I think it was his first job actually, and he was brilliant. I have to say, he was really good. We had a good young team. Billy Dearden had just left, and we had Liam Lawrence's, who played for Sunderland and the like, and Lee Williamson, who went to play Sheffield United, Adam Murray, who's went Derby and he's now at Fylde, I think, as manager. We had some really good players, some young players, and we're all together, interspersed with people like Kevin Pilkington, the goalkeeper. You know, so he wanted us to play football, and he was very good, and he encouraged us to play football, I have to say. And I think it was his first year I was there. We lost in the playoff final to Huddersfield on penalties, which was a bit of a kick in the teeth. And then the following year, he got the sack basically because he fell out with the chairman and sued the club and won, which is, I suppose, relevant really, but for him. Yeah, but yeah, he was a good bloke.
Yeah, I remember that because I was at working at the Nottingham Evening Post at that time. I remember that very well. So what, in terms of, obviously you've taken different things from different managers, I would guess, but in terms of what you took from Keith Curle, in terms of your learning process and then into your role as a manager later on with Crewe, what would you say that you learned or took from Keith as a manager?
I think Keith was pragmatic. He didn't. He was very black and white at times. He was very laid back and chilled. He never let any pressure that he was under, come towards us, which I think was a real good lesson to learn. You know, I didn't know any of the stuff that was going on between him and the boardroom, between him and the chairman, until way after. I don't think many of the players did. Usually the players get a sense. Most footballers are really intuitive. They can feel, you know, they can feel what's happening, if you like. We didn't get. I certainly didn't. Maybe it's because I was young and naive. I don't know. Maybe the older players did and just kept it from us. I don't know. But he was very good at absorbing any pressure. I'd say we weren't under a lot of pressure because we were all young kids and just loving playing football and playing good football and winning most weeks. You know, in the top of the league. But he was very good at that, and I think that was one of the biggest things. And he encouraged us to enjoy ourselves. I think that was, you know, in certainly in today's world where it's all, you know, corporate, it's all very money orientated, it's sinister at times, all the bad side of football that can creep in. He was very much still a big kid at heart. So as much as the detail, it certainly helped me as a former centre half. You know, he was a defender, obviously. It certainly helped me with all the nuances of it. You know, he was also wanted us to really, really enjoy ourselves, and yeah. I really enjoyed my time at Mansfield. Really enjoyed it.
And I should say, I probably have left it, you know, a bit longer than I should have done to say why we've got you on the podcast, actually, because I had a little funny story to start with. I promote each episode on Twitter, and I said that on the 1871 podcast on Monday night, we've got former Crewe manager David Artell, who'd be talking about the situation at Reading and the pressure that Paul Ince might be under. And someone replied to that comment and said, "That's absolutely crazy. I was just wondering what former Crewe manager thinks of the situation at Reading." But the reason we got you on is because you were manager at Crewe for 5 years. You were obviously, there's a Keith Curl connection, as we've talked about. But I just thought it'd be good to get someone to come on from an external perspective. It's usually ex-Reading players or managers that we get on as guests, being a Reading podcast, of course. But you've recently been in that situation of the pressures that modern day managers are under, you know, from the media, from the fans, from everywhere. Really, it's can be quite a pressurized job, and different managers handle that pressure in different ways. But just really as a further introduction to you, David, in terms of your managerial career, you've basically had one job in management so far with Crewe from 2017 until last year. And you achieved promotion as a player with Rotherham, and you're actually the only person who's achieved promotion as both a player and manager at Crewe. You were League Two Manager of the Year in 2020, but you lost your job last year after Crewe were relegated. And as I say, we just want to talk to you about the pressures of modern day management and the type of pressure that Paul Ince will be under as Reading manager. But before that, and Johnny, I'm going to let you come in. I know you're sitting there waiting patiently as usual, so thank you for that. But David, before we talk to you about that, I would like to take you back to your playing days, partly because I know you have one of those funny stories we like about former Royals assistant manager Martin Allen. But you won promotion with Rotherham in the 99-2000 season, and I'm sure some Reading fans will remember that it was Rotherham who pipped Reading to automatic promotion the following season, and Reading ended up losing the playoff final against Walsall that season. Now, I'm pleased to say that Reading won both of those games against Rotherham that season, 3-1 at Rotherham and 2-0 at Reading. You didn't play in the first game, I don't think. Martin Butler, James.
I was suspended.
Yeah, I did wonder. I didn't want to mention that, but being a centre back and knowing you as I do, I wondered if that might be the case. But yeah, so Martin Butler, Jamie Cureton, and Jim McIntyre scored for Reading in the first game. Mark Robbins scored for Rotherham. You did play in the game at Reading, and Reading won 2-0 with goals from James Harper and Martin Butler. And Jamie Cureton, Phil Parkinson, Darren Caskey, Tony Rougier, Jim McIntyre, Graham Murty, Barry Hunter were among the other Reading players who played in that game. Do you remember either of those two games, David?
Well, I played. I'll tell you the sort of my recollections from both games. Starting with the second of them two games, the one where Reading was at home, we lost 2-0, full house. I think we were top actually. I think we were above Millwall even at the time. I might have got that wrong, but we were certainly in the top 2-3, and so were Reading. And we lost 2-0. James Harper scored with a good volley, but he shouldn't have been on the pitch. He'd gone in for a challenge on our 6-yard line with our midfielder, Darren Garner, and broke his leg. He shouldn't even been on the pitch. It was one of the worst challenges I saw in my whole career. And the referee, because there was, literally all 22 players with 18 yards, just missed it. Do I think he should have looked at the massive, bending down Garner's leg and seen that it was a poor challenge? Probably. Did that rock us? I think it did as a team. That Daz was a good player, big influence around the dressing room, and to see him on the pitch in so much pain, I know it sounds crazy, but we're just human beings. And I think, if I remember rightly, I think James Harper scored within probably 5 or 10 minutes of that happening. It might have been a bit longer, but I can remember thinking we just didn't feel right as a team after that. I know it sounds crazy, and it's not an excuse. Reading with a better team on the day, but I do think that was a massive turning point of that game. That's the only sort of recollection I had from that game. The game at Millmoor was obviously Alan Pardew was the manager, Martin Allen was the assistant. 2 weeks before my home debut, I'd got sent off last minute. Guy Branson headed the ball back to the goalkeeper. I'd read what he was doing, but unfortunately for me, Jermaine McSporran of Wickham also managed to do it, and he's quicker than me, so I brought him down. I got sent off. The goalkeeper saved the free kick, and we won 1-0. And the manager, Ronnie Moore, said, "Great challenge. You won us the game." And, he did, and then went to Stoke the week after, scored, got sent off again. But that got 2 yellow cards. But the second yellow card, actually, the linesman had to tell the referee that I was the wrong player. I didn't commit the second foul. It was someone else. It was Guy Branston. So I very nearly got sent off again. So then I missed the Reading game, the one at home. And it's one of them where when you're not in the team, you want your team. I always wanted my team to win, but as a defender, I want us to win 5-4. And one of the defenders be at fault for all 4 goals because you just walk back in the team. Now, it didn't quite happen like that, but we did look because we lost 3-1. But the first goal, the centre half that came in to the team for me, literally ran into our goalkeeper. And I think it was either Martin Butler, it might have been Jamie Cute, I can't remember, who just literally rolled it into an empty goal. So I thought, job done, I'm going back in the team. And so it proved. I have to say, I only got in the team because of a fuel crisis, which sounds crazy, but it's true. So if you want me to tell you that in a minute, I will do. The biggest thing from that game at Millmoor was, if anybody's been to Millmoor, they know it's not a particularly nice ground, an unpleasant ground. Alan Pardew will testify to that because 2 seasons later, he brought his West Ham team to the ground fully clothed, fully changed. They got changed at the hotel, and we promptly beat them 1-0. This was big spending West Ham, who just got relegated from the Premier League, coming to little old crappy Rotherham, Millmoor. The changing rooms are too small. Well, have that. We'll have the 3 points. He did his team talk for us, but that was Alan Pardew. So anyway, I'm stood. If you walk up the tunnel at Millmoor, there's a laundry room on the right hand side with about 4 quite steep steps up, 4 or 5 quite steep steps up. And as you walk up the tunnel, the home dressing room door is bang in front of you. Whereas the away team dressing room, you have to walk all the way down the back of the stand, and you go in sort of 3/4 of the way down the stand. So I'm stood on these stairs, so I can see our door, but obviously I can't see around the corner. But anyway, all the Reading teams stood in the tunnel. The referee and the linesman at the front. There's one linesman stood by Rotherham's dressing room door, waiting for my teammates to come out. And so is Martin Allen. No top on, just a pair of shorts. And I think, if I remember rightly, he had flip-flops on. That's what I've got in mind. I might be wrong with that, but he certainly had no top on and just shorts. So obviously, Kev Watson, somebody I play for Reading, Skip, he comes out first. He sort of gives the old, I ain't got a necklace on, I ain't got a ring on, look at me studs, pulls his shorts up to the assistant referee. At which point, Martin Allen goes, "Lads, this lad can't tackle." Next is Mike Pollitt, goalkeeper. He sort of does his chain, his shorts, his boots. "Lads, this lad hates coming for crosses." And he proceeds to do this for about 4 or 5 players until he gets to Guy Branston. Now, if anybody knows Guy Branston, he's got the head the size of a small country. And he is a big, big lad, let me tell you. He used to pick Paul Ince up, the Grimsby manager, literally above his head and throw him. Hursty was a small lad, but he was 70 kilograms or something, and just used to sort of do presses above his head and throw him. So obviously, Guy does this sort of chain and necklace and rings and does shorts and his boots and all that. And before Martin Allen can say something about Guy, he sort of went, "Rah!" right in Martin Allen's face. And he just went, "Lads, this lad's a shithouse," and just walked down the tunnel. The whole tunnel just burst out laughing. All the Rotherham players, all the Reading players, just burst out laughing. Why Martin Allen doing this? I'll never know. I presume it was just a mad dog thing to do. But Guy caught him on the hop, and nobody messed with Guy. Just nobody did. And because he caught him on the hop, he sort of took about 4 steps backwards. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Certainly in a tunnel of a football stadium, that's for sure.
Yeah, we got a few funny stories about Martin Allen from this podcast.
Yeah.
Can you remember if you played any other games against Reading, David, in your playing days?
Oh, did I? I'm trying to think. I must have done.
I couldn't find any. I've done some research.
Oh, maybe I didn't. I'm trying to think. Actually, I don't know.
Just from that season, while you're sort of trying to remember if there were any other games, who were the Reading players that stood out from that time? Because you had people like Darren Caskey in the side, Phil Parkinson, who's now, of course, Wrexham manager, Jamie Cureton.
I always remember Cureton was a real good player. Live wire, I think he got for me, we got told, he's not very good with the ball into his feet. I thought it was excellent in the 2 games that season. Certainly, the game that I played against him later on in his career when he was at Northampton. Did he go Northampton? Can't remember. But I played against him later on in his career, and he's a good player. When you come up against the strikers that you're on to look at, he was the one that I can remember thinking this lad's a good player. What I would say is, I remember more from the Millwall team that year than I do the Reading team, because I saw it was proven Millwall went up and Reading didn't. Millwall had better players, they did, and they deserved to go up. But obviously Darren Caskey was an excellent player. He could manipulate a ball onto both feet, and his range of passing was excellent. Really, really good. I'm trying to think who else was there.
Was it you mentioned
Whitbread?
Yeah, you mentioned an ex-Reading player that you played with. Any other ex-Reading players that you played with that you can remember?
I played with Glenn Little at Wrexham. One of the funniest guys in football that certainly I come across. He was hilarious. He used to call me the Bear, just because he said I looked like one. No, I don't think I've got any sort of bear-like qualities, but he had a tendency to nickname people after animals. One lad, a striker called Danny Wright, was called the Buffalo, just because he thought he looked like a buffalo, and it just created stuff like that. He'd play cards at the back of the bus, Glenn, and he had a sort of little quirky saying for everything. And he was an excellent footballer as well, I have to say. He had really good feet. His sort of legs had gone by the time he was probably 34, 35 when I played with him at Wrexham. But he was good fun, I have to say. Real good fun.
Go on.
I obviously played with Kev Watson. He was my skipper at Rotherham.
Yeah.
Martin Butler come to us.
Okay.
He was a good footballer. Real good footballer.
He was. I think Martin Butler. I don't know if you'd agree, Johnny, but he was one of those kind of. He was a really good player, but possibly a bit underrated. Do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, when he got that injury, I think against Swansea.
Yeah.
I think he damaged his ankle, and he was never the same afterwards. Up to that point, him and Cureton as a partnership was probably one of the best partnerships we'd had.
That was a good Reading side, wasn't it?
Yeah. We scored goals for fun that season with them two. And Martin Butler did he was a good finisher, but he did a lot of the hard donkey work.
Martin Butler had one of the best brains I've played with. He was really, because he wasn't particularly quick at all. That's why Cureton thrived off him. But he had a brilliant brain. He knew where to stand and where to pull you. And he had technical ability, real good technical ability. And when he had a chance, end of the day, strikers get judged on goals. He finished what he had to finish. He was a real good all-rounder without having exceptional physical qualities. He couldn't get away from players with speed. He was good, but really good.
Yeah. Did you play against Nicky Forster as well, David?
Yes. I don't think it was for Reading. Yeah, I did. I'm trying to think where though. I tend to remember the strikers and I picture him in the kits. It wasn't Oxford. Did he play for Oxford, Nicky Forster?
He played for a few clubs, didn't he?
Yeah.
I'm trying. I did. I can remember because he was. I think Curitan and Forster. You'll say they were completely different because you saw more of them. But I thought them two were very similar in the way that they played. They were a bit of a live wire. Could get in behind you in a flash. That's how I when I come up against them, I can remember thinking to myself that they're similar. That you know, you sort of bracket people in. Like for example, Martin Butler, I equate him to a much better Phil Jevons. I don't know if you can remember Phil Jevons. Yeah. He had a sort of lower league career. No exceptional pace, real good brain, good technical ability. Came to Everton. Butts was better. Butts was miles better. But you sort of group people into who they're similar to, and I think Nicky Forster and Jamie Curitan were very similar. That's just my.
And David, do you remember Phil Parkinson back in his playing days? Because obviously you played against him in that game for Red. Do you remember him as a player?
Yes, I thought he was the sort of he was one of the, I think was sort of like the ticker over and the one that you'd miss more than anyone in the team when he's not there. But I would put someone like Phil down as an underappreciated player. Darren Garner was ours that year. Played every game. He was brilliant at what he did. It was only when he wasn't there that he went, we missed him today. But nobody sort of mentioned him because others would get the headlines all over the pitch. And I thought Phil had that kind of career, really, I have to say.
And David, I want to come on to one of the kind of themes of this evening shortly, but obviously yourself as a centre back, I think I've seen you described, and possibly you've described yourself as, inverted commas, an archetypal old-fashioned centre back. So probably to Reading fans of a particular age, might be somebody like Martin Hicks. I don't know really, but well, obviously Reading had a few seasons up in the Premier League, and you would have seen some of their players play during that time. In terms of, you know, yourself as a defender, who, if there's anyone you can remember from the Reading sides that were in the Premier League, the defenders, is there anyone else that stood out for you?
Gosh, you're testing me now.
Well, you can come back to
think.
You can tell this was a fan.
No, yeah. I'm trying to think. There was people. The first one was Andre Biquet.
Yeah.
Who I look back and I think to myself, he now probably would be in the Championship because he was all about power and pace, but not very gifted. That's that again. If I offend any Reading fans, or God forbid his family's watching, listening, but he was very much a stopper. Now, when you get in the Premier League now, you can't just, centre halves now are the playmakers of the whole team. Certainly the Premier League. They're the ones who have most touches of the ball. They're the ones who dictate the tempo. You cannot be just a stopper. You can't anymore. You've got to have so much more. So someone like him was excellent in terms of low block, snuffing out the opposition's number 9, who was probably the best player, but actually was an absolute liability when you actually wanted him to start moves off.
Yeah.
So
proper
finding that,
defender,
a proper, we're talking about sort of archetypal defenders. He was the first one that I'm coming thinking.
Yeah,
he was brilliant off the ball, on one side of the ball, but actually on the other side of the ball when you're in possession. Oof. But then when we're talking Premier League levels, they cost a lot of money.
Yeah,
To get the full package now, they cost a lot of money.
And obviously Paul Ince, same as yourself, David, former player turned manager. Paul's had, he had plenty of abuse from fans of the opposition teams as a player, of course, but from his own fans now, he's had abuse. He's had what you might describe as arguments with journalists, and all the pressure that goes with modern football management. And Johnny, I'll let you take over a little bit after this. I realise I've asked most of the questions, but I just want to ask David, as somebody who's experienced pressure, you've won promotion as a manager, you've experienced relegation as a manager, and you've been, you've been let go after Crewe got relegated. In the last, you've experienced all that in the last few years, of course. What do you think the pressure will be like for someone like Paul Ince as a modern football manager?
First of all, what I would say is pressure is a state of mind. That's the first thing. So I often said to the players, pressure is only good for two things: barometers and car tires. So if you think you're under pressure, that's just your head telling you you're under pressure. It's a bit like if I said to you, "Are you confident?" What is confidence? Well, confidence is a thought. It's how you're thinking, which manifests in your behaviours and your body language. So if I sit here and go, "I am confident," well, my body language will be expressive, it will be open, etc. If I go, I'm sweating, I don't know what to say to you, I suddenly end up crossing my arms and sort of slouching into each. It's that. Pressure's the same. Pressure's the same. So anybody who feels under pressure or feels pressure in any sort of way actually has to take a step back and go, right, let's have a think about this before we even start. Now that's difficult. It's in when you're a player, you can, like I say, I used to take all the pressure off the players because I used to say, come on, we don't need to dress this up any more than what it is. Again, football, and you downplay it, and the pressure's not on you guys, all that. If that needs to be said, it doesn't need to be said, you don't even say it. But the manager, you actually need someone to help you with that sometimes, because you can end up arguing with press people or stuff. Not that I've ever done that, but at the same time, I can understand why managers sometimes do that, because you're having to deal with lots of things that lots of people don't see. So in terms of pressure, just as an isolated thing, you have to actually compartmentalize it and treat it for what it is. Is Graham Potter under pressure? Everyone will say yes. Everyone will say yes. Is he really? He's had 15 games or something, 20 games. Is he? Well, only Todd Bowley and him will know, and some of the staff. That's the truth. He could be the most relaxed guy in the world. He needs to actually go, right, let's, think about this, all that kind of stuff. I'm telling Graham Potter to do his job, but you can actually take a step back and, right, let's get back to what we do here. Let's get back to what we're good at. And then actually, when you simplify it all, when you work out what the plan is, whether that's for training, whether that's for the game plan for the weekend, whatever it might be, individual plans for each player, staff, what their jobs are. There's a lot of things to do there. But if that's whatever's needed and prioritising, by doing that, the planning takes away stress, takes away pressure, takes away a lot of the gaps that you're actually thinking about and the things. So you've actually got to go, hang on a minute. You've then got to try and relay that to the stakeholders. Stakeholders being the ones above you, CEO, chairman, director of football. But more importantly, really, or just as importantly, the fans. The fans. So, you go, well, Paul Ince has been under pressure this year. That's probably because of results, one, I get that. But also, is the progress? Is the progress? Because I think if most fans see progress, and remember, progress isn't linear, right? They will be forgiving. That doesn't mean to say that they just allow anything to happen. That's not what I'm saying. What I mean is they go, right, we're actually got to go from playing like this to playing like this. We're developing these 4 players to become this kind of player. Now, and be open and honest about it to as much as you can. That's all I tried to be, because ultimately, when I was a kid, I was a fan. And I wanted the manager of my football club to be honest as much as he could be, without letting away trade secrets or giving away the game for the opponents on Saturday or that whoever it might be, his agent or another agent, another club, whatever it might be. So it's that sort of clear and honest communication to as much as you can be as fans, understanding that if he can't be, going, okay, what are you not telling us? Right, okay, we'll save that for a rainy day, rather than just, because the problem now, the world is immediate. Social media makes everything immediate. And on one hand, that's brilliant. The world's such a smaller place. So if you want to contact someone in Algeria, it's easy. Whereas 25 years ago, it wasn't. The downside is that everyone has an opinion, and suddenly someone who's got no context, not actually thought about it, or let's be honest, he's thick as two short planks, because that is true. I know football fans will go, that's not me. Some football fans are thick, and I can say that not having a go at any fan whatsoever, because I'm not associated to any football club. But then they put something out that sort of suddenly gains traction, and before you know it, that's the narrative. And it's very hard for a manager or even a football club to change that narrative. There's got to be objectivity all the way through it.
And David, obviously, I'm not going to ask you to put yourself in Paul Ince's mind, because Paul Ince will be doing things his way, and he'll be thinking a certain way based on how he wants to do things. But in that situation that he's in, and I think it's fair to say that there has been some progress. We've already, at this stage of the season, we've got more points than we had last season. It was, on a lot of occasions, watching Reading last season was pretty dire. There have been some, difficult games this season. There's been ups and downs. We started the season quite well. We fell away. Good result on Saturday. Come back against Watford. There's been a few good points. There's been some progress, but there's still that kind of doom and gloom around the club. And you talk about managers trying to block that side of things out. So a manager in that situation, what is he saying to the players?
I think the first thing on the doom and gloom is it the manager's job, other than to win football games, which I know is a big part of it, for him to strategize where they go? No, his job is to strategize the football team and develop that. So I'm fairly certain Reading's budget will be very similar to, 3/4 of that league, maybe not half of that league. There's a quarter that's probably, a lot lower, and there's a quarter that's significantly bigger with parachute payments. So they are very much a median ranking team. But in order to show progress, how do you measure progress? Now, as a manager, you go, well, you need some help. You need a bigger picture. You need people to drive that side of it, because that gives hope. It gives him hope. It gives him inspiration as a manager. Or it certainly would me. I can't speak for Paul Ince, but it certainly would me. So you know that people are driving the club forward in other ways. And I think that's the first thing. When you come to the players, I read an article in the Harvard Business Review about a month ago, and they're on about Generation Zs. So anyone born from sort of 2000, what they're after in work. They want to get better, improving their actual current role. They want the opportunity to progress in their current employer. So go from, say, not playing to making their debut, playing 10 games a season to playing 30 games a season, scoring 1 goal to scoring 10 goals, however you want to objectify that kind of thing. And then thirdly, having the opportunity to progress beyond that employer. So in other words, get a transfer. Well, and it was something like 95%, 94%, 92% of all applicants said them 3 things. Footballers are no different. Footballers are no different. So as a football manager, head coach, I'm saying to the players, right, I will improve you. I will afford you the chance to improve you, because that's my job. Whether you want to take that That's down to you. How much you want to do when I'm not directly with you, that's down to you. So I always ask my players, how often do you watch football? And you'd be surprised how many don't. Fine, I can't make them. I'm not their dad. Right? I go, right. And of the ones that do, I suggest that you do watch a bit more football. And the ones that do, I then ask the question, how often do you study football? And very few of them do. So after, if you're left back, how often do you watch Zinchenko? Not the ball, just Zinchenko when Arsenal's on. Or whoever it might be. It doesn't, just your position. And understand what they do. Well, that improves you. That just improves you. You will get better by studying football away from when I'm coaching you. Footballers want to do just, if you concentrate on that primarily, 1, the wins will come. 2, the football will get better. And 3, ultimately, the players will want to play for you, play for the club, and want to succeed at a higher level, which is ultimately where everyone wants to be. That for me that's what I did at Crewe. The reason we got relegated in the second, we had the lowest budget in the league, finished in the top half, sold 5 players into the championship, got the lowest budget, got relegated because half the team went to a higher level. That's their business model. They're the only team in the country that's had a profit in the last 2 accounts because we've just sold players that are now worth 10 million quid. That was the business model. I'm the fall guy for it. Fine. Didn't think I would be because the chairman said, this is the cycle, we'll go through it again. He fired me. Fine. New chairman. Okay. That's just part and parcel of football. I think when you take a slightly longer view than that, it's interesting he said that it's Paul Ince's longest job in management and he's, a year? That's a frightening stat. You're not telling me he's that bad a manager that he can't last a year before ready. It's just not having it. He's probably picked unwisely in the first place, and I'm not here to be judge and jury over Paul Ince's managerial career, far from it, because he's been an excellent footballer. He's having a terrific managerial career. But he can't be, it's just impossible. Just not having that he is that bad a manager that he has to, a year is his limit. It's just impossible. So for me, if you improve the players and make sure that they're in that mindset to improve, the pressure dissipates slightly, or certainly because they're in a different mindset, and they will improve and they'll buy into what you're doing.
Johnny, I've been a bit rude, so I'm going to let you kind of take over for now, and just obviously while we've got this opportunity as someone who's had that managerial experience, what do you want to ask David?
David, I've been listening. It's been really interesting listening to you. One thing I was going to ask you, Paul Ince was out of management for 8 years before he came to Reading, and we've got Dylan, who's on a co-host with us, who, has got a good coaching career, but doesn't get a look in, to be honest, in the English Football League. How difficult is it for someone like Paul Ince, who's been out of the game for 8 years, to come in as management as games moved on? And do you think that young coaches are getting a fair opportunity, or name players like Ince, that the bigger names are getting these chances ahead of coaches who are doing the hard yards?
It's a really good question, and I think it's one that's there is different factors at play within football that nobody appreciates, right? So, first of all, football is a small industry. Believe it or not, it's a small industry. It's a global industry, but it's not a big one. If you're in it, you're in it. It's hard to get in it. Certainly as managers and head coaches and stuff. So part of my pro license, my independent study, I did it on what do key stakeholders, owners, directors of football look for when employing a head coach or a manager. You'd be astounded if I told you how many of them said, I just want to know them. They've got to have one of them said they've got to have got promoted out of the league we're in. Well, that narrows it down very significantly.
Yeah.
Before you've even started, they've got to be a good guy. What one of them said. Go on, then, do you analyse that? No, we're just interviewing. You're taking a big gamble, a huge gamble. If you just go, because then my next question was, have you ever had any interview techniques, any interview training? No. So I'm like shaking my head, thinking, you've got to be a good guy. I'm not sure that's a great sort of set of parameters. You're then going to do that interview because you're not doing any sort of soft skills analysis, and you've not had any training to spot this. Well, it's no wonder you've got the 6th highest budget in the championship and you finished 19th last year, which is not last year, year before, something like that it was. Yeah. I can't remember the actual numbers, but I just think, wow, that's just beggars belief. So in terms of, do people like Dylan get a fair crack of the whip? No, is the short answer. There's a massive recency bias. If you've got promoted in the last 12 months, 18 months, you're flavour of the month. If you get relegated, you're suddenly crap. Forget the context. So I know managers that have been promoted on like double the budget of any team in the league, and they thought really highly of. Can't take anything away from them. They've got promoted. They should have got promoted with about 15 games to spare. But the fact that they didn't is not. It doesn't matter. They got promoted. You got fair enough. I got relegated. Lowest budget. Should have finished where we finished. Half the team were playing a lot higher. Made the club profit for 2 years on the spin. All that kind of stuff. I'm a crap manager because we got relegated. It's finished. Way above budget. All that kind of stuff. So there's all that. There's a recency bias. The other thing to consider is your name. Paul Ince is very fortunate because he had a fantastic, fantastic playing career. Nobody can take that away from him. Would any other manager who played majority in League One and League Two get a job after 8 years out of the game? Probably not. That's to Paul Ince's massive advantage. It just makes people like me work harder, work smarter. We can't rely on our name. There's certainly managers this year that have got jobs that I've gone, how the hell has he got that job? Good luck to him. I'm not saying it from a place of bitterness or envy or anything like that. But you go, I don't think what their recruitment process was because they surely couldn't have come up with that answer. But they do, and that's their choice, and they'll stick with them and die by their decisions. The other thing, so there's your name as a player, Lampard, Gerrard, nice people, and both lovely people. Did they do the hard yards enough? No. Have they suffered for it in senior management? Probably.
Yeah.
I'm just speaking as a fan, as an outsider. Would they have benefited from doing 3 or 4 years under 18s each of them, as opposed to Gerrard doing 1 and Lampard doing none? Probably. Because it is a different skill and you find out more about yourself and about the situation you're in. But who am I to say to two absolute football legends what their managerial career should be like? Nobody's a good look to them. So there's that. The final thing is network.
Yeah.
Network. If you know the key decision makers at football clubs, as a head coach, a manager, a player even, you're at a massive advantage. Massive advantage. People appoint people who they're familiar with, who they trust.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example of, I like Gareth Angel. He's a top guy. I don't know if you've had him on. But he's a terrific. Him and Dobbo, Mr. Dobson, assistant. They are lovely, lovely people. They deserve a crack at the championship. They do. 100%. I don't think any football fan could argue that. How QPR have gone from Neil Critchley, who I've coached with at Crewe, brilliant guy again, and his style, Gareth Ainsworth's style, I don't know how that happens because they are polar opposites.
Is it just a gamble? Just hope for the best?
Well, one of them is a really bad appointment because they're so stylistically different. I don't know which one, and it's not for me to judge.
Yeah.
But you can't go from one to the other. whichever way around that is, I don't know. It's not my
David,
call.
can I ask you? You mentioned Lampard and Gerrard, and it was one of the questions I wanted to ask you actually, because you've been Paul Ince was a fantastic player, played for England. We all know that, and obviously Lampard and Gerrard, two great examples of fantastic players for club and country. Kind of hasn't really worked out for them in management. You've come from a playing background, and then I think were you under 18s coach at Crewe? Is that right?
Well, I was player when I was at Crewe. I was a coach with under 9s, 9 and 10s it was. So I've been coaching for 14 years now, and then I coached for 3 years, and then I became academy manager.
Yeah,
so I was academy manager for 3 years before I become manager for 5 years. And obviously, when I was academy manager, I was still coaching.
And you get this, I hear this a lot about referees. It helps if they've been a player, and quite often it's the other way around, where they say, well, they don't know what it's like as a player. But we're not talking about referees, we're talking about managers. So do you think that it helps, or actually it could be a hindrance that you've had a great career as a player, or should it, and is it really all about how good of a coach, how good of a manager you are? Because if you look at the most successful managers, and they haven't been the best players, you look at people like Arsene Wenger, Mourinho, even Thomas Tuchel came in and won the Champions League with Chelsea. Graham Potter has done the hard yards, hasn't he? He's come up from a low level, and he talked about it recently in one of the press conferences. Do you think there is too much favour to managers that have been good players, or should the criteria first and foremost be, what actually let's look at what they've achieved as a manager? Dylan, for example, okay, it's out in Africa, it's out in Asia, but he's won multiple trophies. He's got a reputation in South Africa now, where a team that's in the relegation zone will appoint him, which is exactly what's happened to him, because like you were saying, the last 4 teams he's taken over in the relegation zone, he's kept them up. So he's like a troubleshooter. He's like a sort of a Neil Warnock out in South Africa in a way. Do we need some kind of, and we're getting away from Reading now, but do we need some sort of change in mentality towards who should be brought in as managers?
It's not for me to say whether there is too many ex-players or high-level players given jobs. What I would say is it needs to be a far more thorough process across the board. I was talking to someone today. I had a Teams meeting with someone today from a data company, and he sources managers for clubs. Clubs employ him in his company, and he said you'd be surprised how many teams outside of certainly the Premier League don't look at objective data, then don't go to a specialist recruitment company for all the soft skills, personality, how they can run a session, etc. How do they interact with people? These are all measurable, skills if you do the research. Clubs don't do that. Directors of football don't do that. They will pick someone they are familiar with, or have heard a good story about, or think it's a good fit, and the operative word being think. Now that might mean that someone who has, like Paul Ince, is the best person for the job. But it also means Fred Bloggs from the local non-league scene or a Dylan. Someone who's done that, So why did Blackpool appoint Mick McCarthy and not Dylan Kerr? I don't know the answer. It's just a question. My guess is they didn't do a thorough recruitment process. I don't know. I've no idea. They might have said they did and they considered it, but I've no idea on the inside. For me, it's an area of football that needs so much more work and due diligence. And because the thing is, the people who carry the can are the managers themselves, not the people.
Can I ask you a quick question on that? I sort of mentioned somewhere about there should be managers having like the transfer window for managers where they're given the opportunity. What do you make of that? Like, because how many? I think there's 18 managers been sacked in the Championship so far this season.
Yeah, you're not telling me that 18 managers have got it wrong. Yeah. No, I'm not here to be the LMA representative. I'm not. It's good for me. I'm currently at work, but you can't tell me 18 managers have got it wrong. I just won't have it.
No.
At least half of them, there'll be the wrong appointment in the first place. At least half.
Yeah.
Well, there's people above them that need to carry the can. That doesn't mean that they have to lose the jobs or sell the club. I don't mean that. There's got to be a transparency and an understanding. And I think the transparency comes from what are we, so if I ask you two guys, getting back onto the Reading theme, what is Reading? What is Reading as a football club? Where are they going to be in the next 3 years?
In a big transition.
Well, because that's got to be the manager's got to understand that's whatever the answer is, that's how he's got to take the club forward. The board's got to understand that. The fans have got to understand that. No, I don't know the answer. You two will be better placed than me.
David, I was just thinking as you said that before you put that question to both of us. I just started thinking back to the Medeski chapter of Reading's history, and it wasn't. And yes, of course, it was fantastic. The 106 season, that amazing first season in the Premier League when we finished 8th. So yeah, it was all about results. It was about the way we played and all that. But that was built on foundations, and that actually came right back to the person at the top, Sir John Medeski. He ran a very successful business, and he built Reading Football Club on solid foundations. So you had, a really good scouting network in place, and I can't remember how many years it was. Johnny, you might be able to help me out here, but Brian McDermott, he was at the club for something like 10 years, helping with the scouting and the coaching before he even became manager. And we unearthed players like Kevin Doyle and Stephen Hunt and people like that. Fantastic players for Reading, but they had all the foundations in place. Last year, a lot of Reading fans will say, well, it was a complete mess. We didn't have, and we had, I think, Johnny, we had Brian McDermott on, didn't we, a year ago? And he said, and you asked him about, where are these Irish players now? And he said, well, they're still out there. You're just not scouting for them at the moment. Yeah. So
there's no scouting network in place, was there?
I think that's the disappointment of Reading fans, and it has got better since a year ago. But the disappointment of Reading fans is that, we had that system in place, and now, and then we lost it, and it's almost like the pennies dropped over the last year that, actually maybe we should sort of work back towards what was success previously and the foundations that was built on. So
David, and the academy status as well.
Yeah,
David, that we lost that, which built was over a number of years, wasn't it? So it's a real starting again process as a club.
David, I just we're nearly out of time now, but I just got one final question for you. If you from a Reading context, obviously being a Reading podcast, but also in general, Crewe's a really unique club, isn't it? And you've touched on that, and I've watched Reading away to Crewe. I remember, I think it's probably back in the mid-80s, and I went all the way up to Crewe for a midweek game. I think it was. Crewe won 1-0. I stood behind the goal, right next to the goal, and I think it was Craig Hignett scored the winning goal for Crewe. But it was such a, it was, even though we went there, that was part of the experience, and I think. I went to see Brentford against Palace recently, and Michael Elise was playing for Palace, used to play for Reading, did really well. You know, what Brentford have done is kind of what Reading did before. What do you think? You know, knowing whatever it is you know about Reading at the moment, that there's obviously the transfer embargo and all that sort of thing, and the budget, yes, of course. What would be your thoughts in terms of how Reading could progress in the way that you talked about?
Well, the thing for me is you mentioned Brentford, and I was talking before. I was thinking about Brentford. We've got a clear identity of what they do. They buy undervalued players, bring them to the Premier League, expose them to the greatest shop in the world, football, and sell them on. Do that that's their business model. Crewe, get them in nappies, coach them for 15 years, put them in the first team when they're not ready, sell them for a modest amount to someone out of the food line. You know, you could go on. Brighton, similar to Brentford in that sense. I go, right, what can Reading achieve realistically? Because we all know that they've been under embargo. We all know, and you're telling me they're still under it. We all know that money is tight. We all know the Championship is highly competitive, and there's a high proportion of teams that are very similar. Well, I don't think this is a manager's job to work out the answers to all these questions. This is a chief exec. This is the board, and they've got to come up with their answers. Now, and we can speculate, and we should probably speculate as football fans, as Reading fans. The best way forward. Can you find underdeveloped talent in Ireland? Well, Reading were really good at that. Now, that's going to be already the saturated market because of Brexit. Everyone's looking at Irish players. Reading could not have timed it any worse to sort of pull the plug looking in Ireland because everyone else is now looking at Ireland. Whereas before, that was very much a niche area for them that they had success with. You mentioned too with Hunt and Doyle. So can they find little, sort of margins of advantage? And it doesn't have to be recruitment, but that's obviously that can have a big advantage for the relative small, what you might think is a small advantage. So you've got to, as a board, as a chief exec, and the manager should be involved in this at some point. They've got to come up with the answers that's right for that football club. In this case, being Reading. Do I know? No, I don't. Could I hazard a guess at some of the things? Yeah, I could. So if Reading's budget is, let's say, £15 million this year, I don't know, I've no idea, but let's just say that. Well, I can remember Aston Villa, which is slightly maybe a bit of an onerous example, but it's still relevant. They spent £5 million on transfers one year, and they bought five £1 million players. Ashley Westwood was one for $1 million from Crewe. That's why I know. They bought a lad called Jordan Bowie for $500,000 from Chesterfield. It didn't work out. Well, Ashley Westwood ended up selling him for something like $4 million. Played 200 games for Aston Villa because they had a different strategy. Now they could have afforded it because their budget was significantly greater than Reading's, and they just got the parachute pins, all the rest of it. But it doesn't have to be $5 million. It could be $1 million, and go and buy 3 250 players or whatever. Because you can, but you've got to actually do the work. You've got to have the actual foundation in place to do that. So you've got to be smart. I think there's too many championship clubs that just exist in their own little vacuum. And I'm not levelling that at Reading or anyone in particular, because I'm just talking as a fan. But the best ones, the smartest ones, why are Burnley top of the league? Because they've got the biggest budget? Probably. Also because they're scouted in an area that the manager knows really well. I was with someone yesterday who managed in Belgium this season. Gordon, the lad who plays in midfield. He couldn't get in Anderlecht's team last year. He's top of the Championship. Why? Because he can handle the pressure and he can play the right way. Well, they're two big things. Because he's used to playing at Anderlecht, or he did play at Anderlecht, but he couldn't really get in the team, so he knew what the pressure was. But coming to Burnley is a bit of a breeze, because it's not as big a level. It's not by much, but just a little bit. And the pressure is actually less. So he walks in and goes, "Oh, this is a breeze." Suddenly looks a brilliant player. They've signed about 6 of them. They're now the top of the league. I appreciate they've got more money than most, so which is probably the biggest factor. But they've, through the manager's own doing, by the scenes of it, again, I'm just an outsider, they've found a little niche. How they've got past Brexit, don't know. You know, the under-21 internationals or something for Belgium. You know, so you can do it. You just got to think smart, and you've got to have actually a strategy to do it, and then believe in people and stick with people to get it right. And if you do, you end up going from 17th to 7th. Now, it might not mean you get promoted, but you see a significant improvement. And then you've got to constantly be doing that so people don't come and have your dinner.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Reading did, wasn't it, for years? That was exactly how we did it.
David, look, we've taken up lots of your time. Really, really appreciate having you on. Fascinating insight from, well, currently a former manager, but hopefully not for too much longer. And wish you well with that. And maybe Reading will be playing against you before too long, but let's wait and see. But wish you well with that, David. Thanks ever so much for coming on. And our next episode of the 1871 podcast is available from 7 p.m. on Thursday evening, when our special guest will be Paul Holsgrove, who played for the Royals between 1994 and 1997, part of that team that went so close to going up to the Premier League, of course. So join us for our next episode anytime after 7 p.m. on Thursday. And coming up, we've got something special for you. We've got a Reading FC quiz for you to take part in, and we'll have more details about that in our next episode. So all that leaves me to say is thank you, Johnny, and in particular, thank you ever so much, David, for being our special guest tonight. So thank you to you both, and come on, you R's.